So now it is, I am relating to a person based on my awareness of where and how they are emotionally, which to me, and this is a different conversation, this is the most, like, the ability to master this quadrant is the most underestimated aspect of effective leadership, I think, in contemporary leadership culture.
Well, Dr. Dharius Daniels, welcome to the podcast. This has been a long time coming, but I'm thrilled to have you.
Listen, man, I'm really excited to be here. I am really I'm a recent admirer, but I am a real admirer of the work that you're doing and the difference that you're making. And I'm really excited to be a part of this today.
Yeah, in fact, we could even just start here casually because I have such a passion for mental and emotional health as well as spiritual growth in this space. And I see that threading through a lot of your work right now. Let's just start here. You know, even the conversation we were having before I hit record here, there's an underpinning need in culture, not just in the kingdom and within the body of Christ, but within culture today. People are begging, number one, for authentic relationships, for clarity in their purpose, and we're going to talk about that a lot today, but also just a sense of groundedness. What are you sensing in the people you work with and the people that work for you and even the people you pastor? What's the pulse?
Yeah, I would say you hit the nail on the head. If I were to use a word to kind of describe what I am seeing, sensing in the work that we're doing in our companies and in the work that we're doing through the church, it is the same. I am seeing this insatiable longing for fulfillment. So it is, and this is what I mean by that. I mean that some of the things that I think that we would say, hey, these are like symptoms of this or symptoms of that, are actually sometimes people's attempt to inappropriately acquire something that is a legitimate need. I think we want to be fulfilled. We don't want to be internally or emotionally empty. But when we don't know how to find that or where to find that, we resort to all types of things externally in an attempt to acquire it, when really it's an inside job.
Inappropriately acquire something. What do you mean by that? I'm curious.
Yeah. So when I say inappropriate, I don't necessarily mean like unethical. I mean, It could be unethical, sure, but it's almost like looking for the right thing in the wrong place. Yeah, it's extending this energy, and you're spending time, and sometimes people are spending years. I could say something like, hey, you know, I believe I'm really into productivity. I think we were wired to be productive and to be fruitful.
For sure.
But when it comes to, you know, even something like productivity in and of itself does not satisfy like the longing of your soul. You know, achievement doesn't, like getting there, wherever your there is. Whenever you get to the there, that there doesn't feel like there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's kind of what I mean. And I really feel like people are searching, and some are looking for it in relationships, and some are looking for it in the acquisition of resources, and some people are looking for it in achievement. But at the core, we want to feel fulfilled, emotionally rich.
And that's connected to identity, right? You know, a mentor of mine says, Dharius, he says, you'll never know what to do until you know who you are. And, you know, identity, even, we can go right to your book even. Identity is how you open this thing. And I think it's such a great way of starting the conversation around living on purpose, living a life of purpose, searching for significance. If we even go back to the statement, inappropriately acquiring these things that we desire, where then do you think, and in your experience with the people you work with, where is identity displaced and then missed?
Yeah. So I think to answer the first part of your question, where is it displaced? Obviously, some of that's going to be based on the person. It's going to be based on context and things of that nature. But like generally speaking, what seems to be a trend that I'm noticing now is that identity is attached to like achievement. So a person's sense of self, and I'm not even talking about self-worth, right? Not just how much you think of yourself, but I'm talking about identity, like a sense of self. Who you think you are. I'm seeing this trend where it seems to be attached to how much can I achieve? And again, I'm not anti-achievement. I don't want to come off as that guy because I'm not that guy. Yeah. But yet and still, I'm saying that achievement is a dangerous place to attach your identity to. Because here's the first reason. The first reason is, Chris, I think it's illogical to do so because here's the myth, and this is tough for people to wrap their head around. You can't control outcomes. Yeah. You can only control you can control your decisions. You can control the investments that you make into something. You cannot control the outcome. I can plant the seed. I can till the ground. Only God can make it rain. I can prepare for an interview. I can't make people hire me. I can make the pitch. I can't make people buy the product. I can put my name in the hat. I can't make someone give me the scholarship. I can't control outcomes. And as much as we like to think we can, we cannot. We can influence outcomes, definitely, but we can't control them. And so when you're attaching your identity to your achievement, you're attaching your identity to something that you can contribute to, you can't control, and it's dependent upon so many other factors other than you.
That's so good. Okay. We can't control outcomes, but so many times we think we can, and I think there's this underpinning fear of losing control. The last 2 years should have taught us something, and that is we can't control outcomes, but so many people are still pushing against this thing saying, I think I can and I want to, but I'd like to propose there is an underpinning fear of losing control. What are your thoughts on the dominating fear of losing control that keeps us distracted, discouraged, and then in despair?
Yep, I would agree 100%. I think we all have and so no matter where a person lands philosophically or theologically on this, I think for me, we all have an orientation toward control. And so if we would even use some of the imagery, right, in scripture, the decision, whether it's literal or metaphorical, the decision regarding eating fruit or eating from a tree that shouldn't have been eaten from was like an expression of that orientation toward control. And I think the orientation in and of itself isn't necessarily evil. I think what we're after is an actual emotional need, and that is security. It's almost like, the orientation toward control shows us that at the core, I feel more secure when I'm in control, even though I'm actually I'm not in control because control is an illusion. So even when you think you have it, you don't. And for me, specifically as a person of faith, my conviction, my worldview is this, that my life isn't going to optimize. I'm not going to be at my best if I am in control. And the reason being is that, part of what it means to be human is to be limited. And that is, I don't know everything, and I don't have all power, and there are circumstances that I can't control. And for me, I am more at rest and at peace knowing that there is the ultimate expression of intellectualism and knowledge and love and power who is leading, guiding, looking out for me. And as a result of that, things are going to work out for me in one way or another. So I think what we're at with control, we're after security. It's like, I want to feel safe. And the truth is, we're not always the safest with us.
Well, that's it. Okay, so I mean, you've done so much work in relationship space, and it's actually how I came to know you a couple of years ago. Was through the realm of relationships and communication and such. So if we stay on this illusion, how does that show up in the dynamics of relationships? Not only marriages and dating relationships, but just friendships and whatnot. How does that illusion affect relationships?
Man, that's an interesting observation. And one, it does.
Yeah.
And man, this is crazy because I was literally just doing some writing about this in my devotional time yesterday. And not about this question specifically, but about the difference between control and influence in a relationship. And watch this, and influence, meaning I am using my relational capital with this person to encourage them to become a better version of themselves, like the them that they can be, versus control. I'm using my relational capital in this relationship to try to persuade, force, manipulate this person to become a version of themselves that I would like for them to be. And so I think that sometimes this idea or this orientation toward, I think we lean more sometimes toward control versus influence in relationships for the same reason that we want to be in control in our own lives, because then it comes back to security, safety. I feel like if I can get you to do the things that I think you should do, then ultimately that's going to make me feel more emotionally safe and secure, because I don't want to be the victim of you making a decision or behaving in a way that adversely and indirectly impacts me.
Okay, this is really interesting because just using this as a frame of reference, the last 2 years have been anything but normal or predictable. So in many ways, I think societally, we've learned new behaviors toward fear of losing control, self-protection, self-promotion, etc. So if we were to backpedal through that, Dharius, what do we need to relearn in our character, in our interpersonal dynamics and skills, our ability to attune to people in relationships? Based upon what you just said, what do we need to relearn?
You know, this is going to sound really, really simple, but it is, I think we need to reframe. There's something we need to reframe. And I think we need to reframe the way we see control.
Okay.
And this is what I mean. We have an orientation toward control, and we try to exercise control because we're making an assumption. And the assumption is control is going to get me the results I want. What I'm saying is it needs to be reframed so that we see control in my life or in others never gets me the result I want. It never gets me the result I want. This is what it breeds in a relationship. A control breeds resentment in relationships. That's the only thing it's going to get you. It's going to get you resent. It's going to create, even if a person complies, right? A lot of times their compliance is because of their willingness to be a false peacemaker. And when I say a false peacemaker, meaning, okay, I just want peace. It's not real peace because I'm not actually articulating to you what I want. I'm just burying my desires to avoid tension and avoid an argument, right? So you got that side, or you have someone who might need a little growth emotionally. Yeah. And so because there's a lack of emotional intelligence or health, there's this orientation toward people pleasing. And so because there's an orientation toward people pleasing, they just kind of capitulate to kind of whatever you want. But what you'll see is, right, there's one of my mentors, she put it to me this way. She said, Dharius, feelings buried alive don't die. Meaning that, like, no matter how long somebody buries their feelings, they are going to come out in some kind of way, either verbally or behaviorally. And so I think the reframe is important because it helps us relook at control and let's say, okay, this isn't going to get me what I want. Now, there's another question, which is whether or not what you want is appropriate. That's a different question. But let's just reframe control right now. The idea is, in my life and in the life of others, it doesn't get me what I want. Chris, I wanted to be a lawyer, bro. Yeah. Like, I was going to law school.
Wow.
And if I would have had my way, if I would have been in control, I would have been buried in legal briefs. I wouldn't have freedom of schedule because of court dates and things of that particular nature. So I'm like, man, me controlling my own life would not have gotten me what I wanted. I am where I am and I love where I am, but I could not have chosen this. Like, I didn't know the way. I don't know the route. And yeah, so I would say, I feel like a rich question, but I would say reframe.
This is really fascinating to hear, because we're just meeting for the first time in person, of course. And for listeners who might want to learn more about you, take us a little bit inside your backstory, law school, the reframe that you had to have in life. Maybe we can extrapolate some principles that will lead us to where we're going to go here in this conversation around purpose. Take us in.
Sure. Yeah. So I always start here. I was born and raised in a small town, Kilmichael, Mississippi. And right now it's a population of less than 500 people. I think it's probably around 700 or so when I was there. Listen to me, no stoplight in the entire city, one police officer in the entire city, one full-time police officer, one part-time who drove my bus. I rode his bus. He drove the bus during the day shift, and he was the police officer in the night shift when the other officer went home. Nothing ever happened in the city, but so we had 2 police officers and one doctor. And my father was a bivocational pastor. He welded during the day. He served his congregation at night and on weekends. And so even though my parents did everything they could to take care of us, I mean, it was just a very rural area, just not a lot of commerce, period. And so it's just like really, really, just really difficult, difficult, like poverty of opportunity, poverty of resources, and things of that particular nature. And for whatever reason, I just had this unique interest in law. It was just, I just knew, hey, I wanted to be a lawyer. I like to speak. I like to argue. I was inquisitive. And so that was my plan. And my father, literally, who's probably the most dominant human, he was the most dominant human influence on my life, just really kind of dug in, tried to discover what my passions were, and then mentored me and kind of nurtured that and gave guidance and counsel on, hey, I want you to be in a position to make a difference, to do what matters to you, and to make a dollar so that you can take care of your family in ways that I hadn't been able to take care of you and your sister. And so that was just my plans, man. I was going to law school. And then about my junior year of college, sophomore year of college, I just hit a rough stretch. And I just went through this, it was a period of months, depression. And it wasn't necessarily, it was situational in the sense that it was just, I'm there, I'm on the basketball team. Basketball wasn't going well. School wasn't going well. A bad relationship issue. So it's this compounding disappointment that I didn't have the tools to manage properly. And I didn't medicate through vices. So I grew up around, I saw a lot of alcoholism. And so I'm like, I'm not going to be that. So I didn't drink. And in the country where we were, I'm sure they have access to it now, but when I was growing up, man, you probably have to drive an hour to find some drugs, It's like, It's no drugs in Kilmichael, Mississippi. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't medicate through vices, but I didn't have the tools to properly manage that disappointment. So I just went through this period of depression, couldn't get out of bed, grades were slipping, whole 9 yards. And Chris, at that moment, I just knew when I went through that season, it reoriented my priorities. And so becoming a lawyer became way down at the bottom of my list. I just wanted to wake up and feel good. I wanted to feel, I wanted to not be sad. And And then I saw at that moment that spiritual poverty and emotional poverty were the worst kind of poverty.
Spiritual poverty
and
emotional poverty,
the worst kind of poverty.
And then compounding, as you said, compounding disappointment. So I want to stay there. So I'd like to suggest that you have to reconcile those things before you could even have the space to think about identity, purpose. I mean, knowing who you are is going to help you out of those trenches, but the conversation around what do you want to do with your life, purpose, that's secondary to the fact that you've got emotional, as you said, poverty, spiritual poverty, and then these compounding disappointments. What did you do?
Well, there was a friend of mine who invited me, and I write about him in my book, Relational Intelligence. There's a friend of mine who invited me. A guy, and not even really a friend. I really just met on campus. A friend of mine met him, was like, hey, you need to talk to this guy. And so this guy actually invited me to a Bible study. And I go to the Bible study and I'm there and there's this guy. His name is Keith Quinn and he's teaching. There's not even 10 of us in there. He's teaching like there's 10,000. And when I say he's teaching like it's 10,000, I'm not talking about volume or passion. I'm not talking about volume. I'm talking about passion. I'm talking about you could sense he took what he was doing seriously.
Yeah.
And he's teaching, Chris, and I didn't believe what he was talking about, but I believed he believed it. And I believed it enough to keep coming. And as I came each week after week, I got better and better and better and better. Why? Because he was rich while I was poor. I was spiritually and emotionally poor. He was spiritually and emotionally rich. And so I was benefiting from the deposits he was making into me every week because what I needed was spiritual stamina and emotional intelligence to manage the disappointments I was dealing with. And so as I'm getting that, all of a sudden my desire started shifting. And I now say, what this guy just did for me, I think I want to spend the rest of my life doing that for other people.
Wow.
And that began the pivot away from law school.
Wow, Dharius.
Yeah.
Wow. This is interesting. You've just presented a principle, and I think folks could come away from this conversation with this, and it's this. What I heard you say is that your obedience to show up and lean in preceded your feelings catching up with that obedience. In other words, you had to make the discipline, you had to exercise the discipline to show up, to be consistent with Keith, in Keith's presence.
Yes.
And then your belief and your emotions caught up with your obedience. Because many times in life, folks, listen, we are motivated based upon inspiration, not by discipline. And Dharius, what I heard you say for the listeners is that you were motivated by discipline, and out of your discipline, your emotions caught up. What do you think about that?
Huge. I think you're spot on. I think I wasn't thinking about it that way then. I felt like it was, I don't think I would have went anywhere, but I felt like there was a degree of desperation that I felt initially. And there was also this awareness that what I am currently doing is not making me better. So let me continue to do this because I don't know if me going to this every week is going to work. I know me laying in my bed isn't working. And I know I feel better for the hour that I am in Keith's presence. And so I am going to continue to do this, even though I'm not aware. I am going to make the strategy the goal. So, and that was my goal. It's like, okay, hey, I'm just going to go here each week. I don't know how to get better. I just know that I feel better when I am here. And so my goal every week is going to be to talk myself into getting out of bed and going to this event every week. And that's what happened. And over time, it was just the accumulation, the compound effect.
Yes.
Just kind of came into play. And I just realized, I'm actually, hey, it's been a week. I'm not sad anymore. I saw incremental increase. And then at some point, I think it was incremental improvement. And then at some point it became exponential.
You made the strategy the goal. I love that. I'm strategic in my temperament, and so that electrifies me when I hear that. I get the juice when you say strategy is the goal. But let's make that actionable for the listeners. What does it mean, Dharius? What did it mean for you to make the strategy the goal?
Yeah, and so when I say strategy, I want to reemphasize and reiterate this. I don't even know if it was a long-term strategy. I think when a person feels the way that I felt, obviously you don't want to feel that way ever again. But I think your immediate concern is, okay, I want to feel better right now. Yeah. And so for me, after my first experience there, it was like, I didn't quite believe this guy. I didn't believe the things that he was saying yet, but I believed he believed it, and it inspired me, and I felt better. And so I don't think the goal for me, I don't think the strategy was, hey, this is a strategy that's going to accomplish the goal of you not being depressed anymore, Dharius. But this strategy is going to accomplish the goal of you feeling better today. So I started looking, I think it was Tuesdays. I can't remember. I think it was Tuesdays or Thursdays, whatever day of the week it was. But I remember on Tuesdays or Thursdays, whatever the day it was, I knew I'm going to feel better. So my strategy is going to be to do I'm going to make the goal the strategy. And that is, what is the thing that I do that makes me feel better? I got to talk myself into doing that.
That's good. Okay, I want to thread this through again, add another layer to it. If strategy was the goal, focus is required for the strategy to work. So right now, cultural narratives about purpose and meaning in life and relationships and mental health are not only vying for our attention, but for our buy-in. So where purpose is calling, mm-hmm. When purpose calls, it requires of us focus because distraction is also calling. What do you think is the greatest threat, Dharius, to maintaining focus in life right now for people?
Of course, it depends.
Yeah.
But here are a few things. The first is opportunity.
Okay. Tell me more.
Yeah. The first is opportunity. And that is, one, just because of the evolution of the digital space.
Yep.
It gives us access to opportunities at a level that is just really, I think, unprecedented.
Yeah.
And this is really the case since COVID. With the increase of remote work, the flexibility that people are now operating with gives them opportunities maybe to use their time in ways that they couldn't use it if they were assigned to a cubicle all day. And I think that here's one of the ways I try to frame it. I put it this way actually in the book. Purpose isn't about you making a difference. It's about you making your difference. And because your difference is your destiny. And so with that being the case, when we're like exposed to these opportunities, I'm sure you have opportunities to help a number of different people in a number of different ways, but it takes right discipline, it takes focus, it takes discernment to be able to recognize which need is my responsibility. Every need's not my responsibility. Which need is my responsibility? Which needs am I most equipped to actually address? What problems do I feel like I've been created to solve? And so I think one of the greatest challenges that a lot of people are dealing with is that there's these opportunities to achieve so many different things or to serve in so many different ways that it can be very, very confusing, which is why I think one of the greatest gifts any of us can receive living in an age and an era like this is the gift of clarity. Like just being clear on this is who I am, this is who I'm not, this is what I do, this is what I don't. These are my values. And I said, put it this way, when your values become clearer, the decisions become easier as it relates to, opportunities and things of that nature.
That's really interesting. Okay, so in our toolbox, in this toolkit that we have, I heard you say discernment's in there, clarity's in there. What happens if we're in the middle of tumult, disappointment, chaos in life, but we still can see a sense of purpose, but we're lacking clarity? How do we move forward when we have a measure of discernment, but lack clarity?
Yeah. So here it is. This is about to sound just so
That's okay.
almost like a signature talk, but it is just such a conviction of mine. It is a deep, deep, deep conviction. So you can get clarity in isolation. You can, but what I found in my experience is that clarity often comes in the context of community. And so this is what I mean. Let's use Johari's window as a framework, right? So let's say, let's talk about the blind. So let's pick up the blind self. Like, there are things about me I can't see. If we were to use the emotional intelligence quadrant, the first quadrant of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Sometimes I think you need community to help to increase that. Why? Because we got blind spots. There's just things about me that I can't see. And so here it is. When I say that, Chris, I'm not just talking about like things that need to be improved. I'm not talking about something that might be unethical or unhelpful or unhealthy for me. I'm saying sometimes there's value we can add that we aren't aware of. There's this unconscious competence that we possess. And we need people around us who can see what we can't see, to speak into those things, to nurture those things, to encourage those things, because sometimes those things are the key to clarity. You know what I mean? Like, it's, what am I supposed to be doing in my life? And sometimes you don't even know that organically throughout conversation, you've been sharing your heart with people that you're in community with. And they're like, you talk about homeless people all the time. And now you're like, you know what, you're right. Yeah, actually, now I think about it, you do. And it was something that's always been there. But it takes sometimes community to be able to help you see some things about you that you couldn't see without another set of eyes.
So clarity often comes, what I heard you say is that clarity often comes in the journey. We often start with the thought of this is how it's going to be, and then down the road, clarity is sharpened based upon our commitment to just go forward, right? We often are tentative in our nature to say, okay, I got to see 5 steps down the road. And what I heard you say, I think what I heard you say is 2 steps down the road, we'll see those 2 steps ahead, not necessarily the 10 steps ahead. And I know I'm sort of mixing a metaphor, but my point is this: where a sense of purpose is calling to us, where a sense of clarity is desired within us, we've just got to go forward.
Yeah, because here's one of the things. I think also the reason we have to go forward is this, and I think this might just be, what I'm about to say is probably a reflection of my worldview, which is obviously influenced by my faith. And that is, we don't always have the clarity we want, but that doesn't mean we don't have the level of clarity we need. I think you get, sometimes you do have enough clarity to take the next step. You might not have enough clarity to take the next 3, but sometimes you got enough clarity to take the next step. Now, we want clarity for the next 3 or 4, but sometimes we have enough for the next one, and that's the one we need to take, because I do think this: clarity is seasonal and clarity can be scaled. So when I had a degree of clarity when I made the decision to pivot from law school and to pursue another career, there was a degree of clarity. The degree of clarity that I have now is much different and much greater than the clarity that I had when I made that pivot. But this clarity that I have now wasn't clarity I needed when I made that pivot. I just needed to know. Here was the clarity I needed to know. Law school wasn't it. Now I had to figure out what was it. But I was clear enough to know this is not the direction to go. And it goes back to the discipline to be willing to simply take steps, and some clarity comes through experimentation. Like, you're taking steps, you're experimenting, and as you do so, you get the gift of clarity.
That's so good. Okay, then what are some key distractions in play that many of us don't consider to be distractions, and as such, we fall prey to them?
Comparison. Comparison would be one. And so I know people might not be used to comparison being framed that way, right? Comparison as a distraction, comparison is definitely a distraction. It is definitely, and I think it's human. I think we all have a tendency to do that. But when it is not, managed properly, and we become obsessive, and I know that's relative, but obsessive, in that area, it's a huge distraction, because I can't do the thing that I'm supposed to do when I'm spending or investing time and energy comparing what I'm supposed to be doing to the thing you're actually doing. Right. So a lot of times when we're comparing the thing we're supposed to be doing that we're not doing to someone who's actually doing their thing. And I think, again, with the evolution of the digital space, which is an amazing gift, we also are now more exposed to what is happening in the lives of other people. So that increases the likelihood of comparison. And I'm even wondering, as humans, how much exposure is healthy. I'm like, I don't know what that line is, but like, how much is too much before comparison almost becomes inevitable? You and I both are like Dallas Willard. I'm a fan, influenced by him, and one of the most profound statements I heard him say was the importance of cultivating the ability to admire and not desire. Huge. That was such a game changer for me, to look at what's happening in the life of someone else and admire it, and genuinely, though, not desire it. So I think comparison it's not the only one, but I think to answer your question, comparison is a huge one.
So how do you do it? How do you desire but not admire? That is such a key player in this conversation, because even where I want to go next is something you talked about in your book, and that is around becoming, as we hear in culture today, become the truest, best version of yourself. But like, how do you admire without desiring?
I think we're going to reframe and just kind of here, like I'm going to say even just reframe our expectations. Like, I think there is an orientation to desire. I think that might be human. I think admiring without desiring is, no one's going to do it perfectly. You can't progressively get better. But I think that's a result of two things. Okay. I think it's a result a lot more, and I'm not saying that spiritual maturity isn't important. But what I'm saying here, I think when it comes to admiring without desiring, what pushes the pendulum to the other side of the equation is more so emotional intelligence. That's going to be huge. So because that's going to help you not only be aware of who you are, strengths, weaknesses, etc. It's not going to just help you with awareness. It also helps you with acceptance. So I think even when people look at the emotional intelligence quadrants, they just look at it like, okay, this is a tool to help me manage negative emotions, as opposed to saying this is a tool that can this is a skill I need to develop, but the quadrant is a tool that can actually help me manage my life. So I need to be aware, not just of like things about me that I need to address and where I need to grow, but I also need to be aware of what is uniquely valuable about me, the unique contributions that I can make, the things that I can do extraordinarily well in terms of my competencies, and then the value that I just add with my character in terms of character traits. Like, I think emotional intelligence, self-awareness is awareness of it all, not just awareness of the negative. And so when you valued yourself properly that way, when you are aware of that, you can look at the value of another person and not question yours. Right? You can look at what's happening with someone else and say, man, I really admire that. But I don't desire that, because me seeing that doesn't make me think any less of who I am, what I have, and what I'm doing. I really feel like that space, really increasing emotional intelligence, is really the key to being able to admire and not desire.
So how do we, if we can just spend a little time here, then how do we become more emotionally intelligent? This is going to affect the pursuit of purpose, our purpose. This is going to affect relationships, our ability to interface with the world around us. What does it require? What does it take?
It is really, I keep going back to the quadrants here.
Unpack that if you want to.
Yep. So when we talk about it's kind of 4 primary quadrants. There's self-awareness, which should lead to self-management. Right? Now, for me, again, now my faith kind of informs this. I think we can go from, I think there's another option for people of faith. And that is, you can go from emotional intelligence to emotional health. And I'm not talking about mental health. I'm talking about emotional health. So you can go from, for example, self-awareness. So first quadrant, self-awareness. Next quadrant, self-management. And so the idea is, once I'm aware of some of my emotional tendencies, I need to be honest about that and figure out what kind of strategies do I need to put in place to properly manage these. Right? I'm saying for people of faith, there's another option. And the other option is this. You can get existential assistance on addressing some of these issues so that they become easier to manage, or you get an emotional miracle and they don't become an issue for you at all. So that's what I mean there. But the point to answer your question is, there's the self-awareness, which should lead to self-management. And then there is social awareness, which is, okay, now I'm self-awareness. I'm aware of the way my emotions are impacting me and others. Self-awareness is now, okay, I'm now aware, I'm aware of others' emotions. And I'm picking up keys, and I'm not oblivious to triggers, and that leads to the last quadrant, which is now relationship management. So now it is, I am relating to a person based on my awareness of where and how they are emotionally, which to me, and this is a different conversation, this is the most, like, the ability to master this quadrant is the most underestimated aspect of effective leadership, I think, in contemporary leadership culture. Huge. 100. I don't even think you can attract and keep good talent, because good people always have options. I don't think you can attract and keep good talent without this. But the point that I'm making is, to answer your question. You asked a question. The question is,
it's great.
I love it. The question is, how do you increase it? And it's just basically increasing, being intentional about taking steps of, okay, how can I become more aware? And obviously that can come through specific exercises like journaling. Peter Scazzaro talks about something called naming and taming, which is, that's something I kind of do every day. Let me name what I'm feeling so I can tame what I'm feeling. And so you want to increase the awareness. And then this is where I think a coaching community become important, because I don't know if you want to resort to trying to figure out management strategies for yourself by yourself. I don't know if you want to do that. And I also think you need a coaching community for the social awareness also. I think now part of that comes from, I don't think you can have the third quadrant without empathy. Like, I think you actually have to care about other people to pick up on how they're being impacted emotionally. And I think we've all been in situations where we've been on the other end of conversations, or we've witnessed people in conversations, and we're like, man, this person is totally oblivious to the fact that this other person is checked out, but they're just continuing on. So those are some ways that I think, without getting too deep in the weeds, that we can kind of increase that area.
That's so helpful. I love the weeds. I do love the weeds. Deep dives are my favorite, Dharius. So
I can tell by the questions you ask.
well, I really like getting under the hood, because I believe it's under the hood where transformation happens, not simply behavior modification. And really, that, Dharius, that's my heartbeat for everything I do around the podcast. And I think it's why people show up here, because I think many people are coming to terms with the fact that behavior modification is so short-lived, and transformation beats the heck out of self-help.
Yes.
I want to see transformation take place in the lives of people. And I just want to say quickly, folks, head to the show notes after this conversation, wintoday.tv. Get a copy of Dr. Dharius Daniels' brand new book, Your Purpose is Calling. Many of the things we're talking about today are addressed in this book and more, because at the end of the day, I want to live a life of faithfulness and fruitfulness. Mm-hmm. But even what you were talking about moments ago leads me to this. And I'm so grateful you brought this into the conversation early on in your book, because there's a lot of become the best, truest version of yourself messages in culture right now. And I'm thankful for the uptick in conversations about identity. But as people of faith, there is a differentiator that I want to talk about. The best, truest versions of ourselves will never be found inside of ourselves, but as we find ourselves hidden in Christ. So here's a simple analogy. If we're the source and supply of our own strength, like if I have a 16-ounce bottle of water and I drink all of the water in that, who's going to refill that water? Who's going to replenish my supply? So what happens when we run ourselves dry? Dharius, speak into this as you'd like in this space of mental health, emotional health, spiritual growth. As I said, I'm so deeply passionate about helping guide my listeners in the opposite spirit. So you talked about this in the book, the fallacy of follow your heart, become the best version of you, my dreams. Unpack that as you want.
Yep, sure. I think in some way it kind of speaks to a part of the conversation we were having earlier. I think it was either you or me. We used the word illusion, this idea of, I think John Mark Comer would call it deceptive ideas.
That's exactly it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's, and I think in and of itself, the desire to evolve into the best version of myself and I follow my heart in and of itself is not inappropriate or unethical. It's just misguided. It's, and this is what I mean by that. Well, I'll frame it this way. This is what I meant when I talked about this in the book. And I feel like we live in a culture, a secular and a Christian culture, not a kingdom culture, but a secular and Christian culture that says, follow your heart, become the best version of yourself. But what that is actually code for is conform to my expectations of you.
Come on, Dharius.
And when you don't, I'm going to tell you to be yourself, but then I'm going to punish you when being yourself is not a version of yourself that I think you should be. And really, when I tell you really, that is kind of what's at the heart of this book. This is my third one, and I'm more of a concepts guy, right? I think in concepts, I speak in concepts, and I've written a lot of my first two books were written just conceptually. This one, though, Chris, I wrote, man, listen, this was a lot for me because it was way more experiential, way more vulnerable, way more using concepts to tell my own story. And that is my struggle with trying to be the highest and best version of myself, which was a version I either thought people wanted me to be, watch this, or as a spiritual leader, I was supposed to be. And the emotional toll that took on me, the lack of fulfillment I had to deal with because of that, and the emotional strength it took to resist the culture of conformity and say, what does it really mean to embrace my own unique identity, to understand who is Dharius, and then to embrace it in a way that says, this Dharius is enough. That was even that experience, and a lot of it, I kind of put in the book. I share some stories, but the point that I'm making is that season of my life. I'll just put it that way. Was probably one of the most emotionally taxing, but by far the most emotionally rewarding at the same time. Coming to terms with the highest and best version of myself isn't who people think I should be or expect me to be as a spiritual leader.
See, you're hitting something so important for us to stay on for a moment, because there is a shadow side of this message. You do you, follow your heart, the Freudian stuff. Because all we've seen, well, I shouldn't say all, a lot of what we've seen in culture as a result of this is not more fulfillment, not more people walking in peace and intelligence, emotional intelligence, relational intelligence. What we're seeing is an uptick in despair, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. What's the disconnect then? Yes, sir.
I love your questions, and sometimes I'm laughing because it's like my head goes a million miles an hour, and I have to think through the right way to say some of the things. Because I don't, sometimes the first thought that comes to my mind, sometimes it needs to be framed differently. So anyway, man, this is about to be a bit controversial, but I think it's twofold. That's the point. You say, what's the disconnect? It's twofold. And in one sense, I think Christian culture has contributed to the disconnect. Because we have not. And so when I say that, people are like, what do you mean? I mean, primarily in the West. I'm speaking specifically in America, and I'm speaking of like mainstream cultural Christianity here, which kind of operates with what Dallas Willard would call the great omission instead of the great commission. And as a result of that, there is some behavior modification, but not a lot of deep transformations, not a lot of renovations of the heart. So we have not discipled people into becoming the kinds of people that can actually connect those dots that you're talking about, because only that kind of person connects those dots. I don't know how you connect those dots without being that kind of a person. I don't have a 3-step strategy, for you. So like, even when you asked the question, the first thing that came to my head, I was like, Jesus, which is such a weird, who's Jesus? But, so one, I think, right, you've got, Christian culture and then two, and both of these traditions I'm a part of, it is now, and I'm not talking about guys like Ziegler, Rome, Les Brown. I'm not talking about these guys, but because all these men were people of faith. But there's also, right, this stream in the personal development culture that has also contributed to that disconnect, because it fails to emphasize these things that you're actually talking about.
You got it.
Like, it's like, yeah, you guys are leaving out some of the most important parts. All the things you're inspiring me to do, I can't do. without connecting these dots, and those parts are left out. And so when it comes to forming and shaping people, you're probably going to be like, there's a religious side and then there's a personal development side that's contributing the most in culture to the formation of people. People are being shaped by one of those streams primarily. And I think there's some gaps in both of them that contribute to that disconnect you're talking about.
Yeah, I so appreciate this, and I could take this in the direction of saying, Dharius, listen, because I am so passionate to say that Christian culture is so very different than the kingdom. There's a subculture and nuances of a subculture that are just not helpful. And, we can honor the past and, like the old saying, eat the meat, throw out the bones. And I think this is the case in every realm of society and culture. But this comes back to identity. Here's a healthy wake-up call for all of us. Dharius, you wrote this in the book. God will not honor the direction of our lives when we are living outside of our unique identity. In other words, folks, lean in. God will not bless who we pretend to be. Why do you think a lot of people continue to live frustrated and bored out of a false identity? Is it that they can't recognize that which is false?
Man, that's a great observation. And I think in part that's true. I think in part that is true, that they can't recognize that which is false. But I think there's something else. And I talk about this in the book, like section two in the book is on embracing, kind of like, okay, it's one thing to understand my unique identity, it's another thing to embrace it. And in that section of the book, I deal with some of the things that actually get in the way of people embracing, who they actually are. And I think, and I keep going back to this, and some people may wonder, like, yo, why does he keep going back to emotional intelligence? Or like, why is he even into emotional intelligence? And it's because I realize that there cannot be any transformation of the self without the transformation of the soul. It is just, it's just the quality of your life is based on the condition of your heart, period, point blank, guard it, for out of it flows the issues of life. And so the point that I'm making is, get off my soapbox there, but
you can stay there.
Yeah, that's why I keep bringing it up. I keep bringing it up because there's just no deep, real, lasting transformation without that. It's impossible. And so, yeah. Let me just leave that there.
That's fine. You are in many ways, in my mind, such a key player in the relationship space. The value that you've brought to the relationship space has been so helpful. So, you were talking about soul transformation. Well, in the case of relationships, when purpose is calling, living a life of purpose, there will be people in our lives. And so the people that have access to our hearts will influence how we live out of a sense of purpose in our lives. But the closer people are, the easier it is to experience woundedness. So soul ties, soul wounds. Yeah. How do we heal from them? We can't push people away.
Yeah. So that's an amazing question. And it kind of speaks to, and I didn't want to go down this rabbit hole, which is why I kind of stopped short of asking the last question, because I think soul wounds are primarily the reason people live in false identity. Oh, yeah. So in my experience, in terms of whether I'm in the coaching space or in the church space, 100%, there has been, I call it rejection infections. Right. So
Tell me more.
The act of rejection can leave an infection.
Dang.
And that infection often shows up in a personality trait. And so you can carry that personality trait for so long, you can assume this is my actual personality, when it is just a personality trait that you've developed because you didn't manage rejection properly, is that you weren't accepted for who you really are by someone you really loved and valued. And as a result of that, you assume that who you really are wasn't good enough. So instead of becoming a better version of yourself, you became a different version of yourself. and you think that is your authentic self. And as a result of that, people living in a false identity. When I tell you, I see this all across the board, and I see it on every level. I'm talking about if it's something like a continuity program or a coaching group, or something like a mastermind and an inner circle. Like everybody on every level is kind of dealing with that, because there is not what I call a pain plan that helps people actually manage soul wounds. I have a soul care strategy, literally. And when I say a soul care, I'm not talking about self-care. I'm talking about the way I respond to wounds, a process that I'm able to take myself through if I feel like I'm stuck in getting over or getting through some pain. And so I think I would encourage everybody to develop a pain plan. I am going to be wounded. Like I just finished doing this training with people in my coaching group on leadership pain. And I was like, there's no such thing as a leadership role without pain. You cannot have it. Even if the pain just shows up in the form of disappointment, you're going to deal with it. You can be a parent. That's a leader. Your child's going to do something to disappoint you. Period. Like point blank. Like you can't avoid it. Here's the question. You know you're going to hurt. That's inevitable. Do you have a plan on what to do when you hurt? And so I think developing a pain plan, and I actually have one right here in my phone. This is so weird, but I'm going to pull it up if that's okay. Like these,
of course it is.
That's cool.
Of course it is.
Yeah, these are just like questions I ask myself when. So I've got strategies for, hey, this is it's like a 5-fold strategy for what I do with pain. So here's the first thing. It's like, okay, Dharius, normalize it. So when I've been wounded, I need to normalize it. This doesn't mean I excuse it. It doesn't mean I accept it, but it means that I realize it's inevitable, that sometimes I'm going to be the victim of somebody else's imperfection, and somebody else is going to be the victim of mine. So let me just normalize this. I am not the only one this is happening to. It is happening to other people. Like I have to remind myself of that, because if not, I can go like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? This sucks, etc. The second thing is process it. And so for me, I have to make a decision. Okay, do I need a processing partner with this one? Right? Because an event happens, there's a story I'm telling myself. I need to make sure that the story I'm telling myself is actually true. You know what I mean? And so I need people in my life, which goes back to relational intelligence, that are processing partners. It could be friends, it could be coaches, it could be counselors. Then the third thing is forgive it. Because this is a prerequisite for healing and necessary for me to serve other people well in the future. And for me, I don't know how to walk somebody through this if they're not a person of faith. And so I'm sure there are ways to do it. I just don't know another way to do it, because for me, forgiveness is pardon. And it means that I am going to accept the sacrifice of Jesus as full and satisfactory payment for what you did to me. You owe me a debt. You can't repay it. You can tell me you're sorry. You can't give me my tears back. You can't give me my days back. So I am going to say your debt's been paid in full. That's my closure. I release you of this. And I'm doing it not just because I like you. I'm doing it because I love me. So forgive it. And then the fourth one is learn from it. I don't want to hold a grudge or nurse the wound, but I want to learn the lesson. Did I hold on too long? Did I not move on quickly? Did I not set boundaries? Did I not vet before I hired? And then I want to plan for it, which is the fifth one, which means I'm going to ask myself, when pain happens, when I have a soul wound, what will I say? Like, how am I going to talk about it? Who will I talk to? Who am I going to talk to about it? What will I not do? What do I have the tendency to do when I'm hurt? That I'm going to make a decision that I won't do. What will I do? What are the things I'm going to do to proactively get better? And what will I believe? So I literally have that written down in a Google Docs on my phone to kind of help me manage soul wounds.
Folks, if you're driving right now, I'm just going to repeat it. If you're listening at home, I'm going to say it again. I want you to write this down because that's gold. If it's okay with you that I repeat it, Number 1, normalize it. Number 2, process it. Number 3, forgive it. Number 4, learn from it. Number 5, plan for it. Your Purpose is Calling, Dr. Dharius Daniels' brand new book, wintoday.tv. Head there right now. Get a copy, or 20. This has been an exhilarating conversation with you today, and I am so thankful we finally got to meet. And man, what a conversation. Thank you.
Well, absolutely, man. Thank you for what you're doing. I'm a big fan of it. I'm grateful for it, and honored to be a part of this incredible platform.
Thanks, Dharius. Hey, tell people how to stay connected with you.
Yep, I'd say in the social media, everything is Dharius Daniels, and Dharius is spelled with an H, so I'm easy.
Right.
Like, it was tough for me growing up having to spell my name all the time, but I'm grateful now because it's Dharius. So it's Dharius Daniels on all social media platforms, and dhariusdaniels.com is our website.
Awesome. Appreciate you so much. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.